Hello everybody, welcome to today's video. My name is Maggie. I am the themer half of our channel, ThinkerThemer. I'm usually joined by my beautiful partner, Amy, who's the thinker because she's all about mechanics. However, for this video, it's a little bit of a different and special one because this is a game that I love, as in the video game. So Stardew Valley is what we're going to be talking about. It's a game that I love, the video game. I've spent hours and hours invested in the video game. And when this came out and turned out that it's a cooperative game, usually in our household, we don't tend to do cooperative games. We're a very competitive household. So if there's a co-op, either we usually won't necessarily play it or it'll kind of fall down to me as a solo player because I'm also the solo player in the house. So I just wanted to cover this very briefly and go through how the transition to board game kind of played out from the point of view of someone who adores the video game, the elements that I liked and I didn't like so much about it, but most importantly, how it plays solo. And the bit that I'm most excited about is I want to share with you the campaign mode, very unofficial campaign mode that I use that turns this game into probably one of my absolute all-time favorite solo experiences, but it is not the way that is sort of intended or written in the rule books. So I'll be covering that in a bit. But first let's get into Stardew Valley. What's it all about? This is a game designed by Cole Medeiros and Concerned Ape, who was the designer of the video game. And just like in the video game, in Stardew Valley, we have inherited this farm from our grandfather. And so our grandfather had all these great hopes and goals of things that he wanted this farm to achieve, but really you kind of, as you're playing, you kind of get there was an ulterior motive here, and it was more about our own personal flourishing and development. We start out as a fairly burnt out Joja factory employee, and then we're by coming into Stardew Valley and working on this farm, we start reconnecting with, nature as part of, kind of getting to undertake or learn all these skills of farming and foraging, even mining and fishing. But then also there's all of these beautiful connections and friendships and even relationships that we're going to be developing with the people of the town. At the same time, we're going to be trying to make this town, renovate the town, or bring the life back into our community center and make sure that it's sustainable so that we keep the big bad corporate Joja corporation away and sort of stay in the city, stay with the big smoke, and let us have our beautiful town in peace. So let's talk a little bit about how the game plays. I won't be going into a detail how to play. There are other videos that cover that. All I want to give you is a bit of an overview of what are you trying to do in this game. So the game takes place over 1 year, and that year is divided into 4 seasons. And each season is going to have 4 different cards that kind of give you a bit of a setting of what's happening at the start of that stage. There are 2 main things that you need to accomplish by the end of that year. One is you need to complete 4 of our grandfather's goals, and then we also need to complete all of the bundles in the community center. First, we have to reveal them, which cost hearts to do, and then we actually have to acquire all the different items that are needed to pay and complete those bundles. So in any given turn, we have a range of activities that we can do, just like in the video game. Like we can decide if today we want to water our plants and look after our crop in the hope that eventually we're going to have, beautiful fruit and vegetables that we can sell or that we can gift to people to, strengthen some of those relationships. We can decide to go fishing. As we're moving around the board, we can forage, which is picking up some of these tiles that we don't necessarily know we're going to find until we collect it, or we might be collecting wood from the trees that we pass along the way. The other option is we can go to the mines, and in the mines we're going to find all sorts of different ores or sometimes geodes, which can be taken to Clint to open up, and that's where we might get different minerals or artifacts that can then be donated to the museum. Also, as the seasons progress, the other thing that we're going to be able to do is we're going to be upgrading, getting profession upgrades, which are these cards that then make it easier for us or give us different boosts and make it easier for us to do a different range of tasks depending on what profession we are focusing on at that time. When you're playing cooperatively, which you can play, as we've said, between 1 to 4 players, the idea is it actually plays very similarly to the solo mode. The way that the game is scaled is for all the different objectives. Usually, if you're playing multiplayer, if there's a cost to be paid to meet that or fulfill that objective, usually you'll have to do it multiplied by the number of players. So when you're playing the solo mode, it's really the most streamlined version of the game. You do have an additional concession playing solo in that you're not stuck to only picking one profession and only being able to upgrade or have profession upgrades from that profession alone. You actually have, every time you get to do a profession upgrade, you can choose from a range of different professions, which will again give you advantage across a different skills around the board. So taking a turn is fairly straightforward in that all we're really doing is we're revealing one of the season cards so that we know kind of what's the setting, what's happening that day. And it might be things like, one of your crops turns into the quality side, or it was raining, so you kind of get to automatically have all your crops be watered, or you might have to draw an event card. And then we're going to decide where we want to start that turn. So we can go anywhere on the map. And if you've played the video game, you will immediately recognize, because the layout of this map is exactly the layout that you would get in the video game, or at least the farm that I used. So once you decide a place, so you might decide, look, I'm going to start at the mines. You have the option of either taking 2 actions, and then that's the end of your turn, going back to your farm, or taking an action, moving, and taking a second action. So in this instance, whenever you move, so if you take an action in the mines involve some dice rolling to then, depending on what you, the symbols that you get will determine what item you gain from that mine. So you can either do that twice, so do the action twice in a row, and then that's the end of that turn, or you can decide to do it once and then move, say for example, back to home base to water your crops, and along the way we're able to pick up one of the foraging tiles if they're still available. So that's kind of like a free little additional bonus item. When we water crops, all that happens is that they kind of move along. As soon as we water them to the point where something comes off the board, then that's an item that we get to store in our personal player board if we have space. And then it's something that we're able to sell or exchange or give as a gift to get some very, very powerful hearts that can actually be used as a bit of currency. And it's kind of like what we're going to need to be able to reveal some of those bundles in the community center. So what did I think about this game overall? I was incredibly excited to play it, obviously, because I'm a huge, huge fan of the video game. I thought at first glance, the first thing that I'd have to say is the look and feel is fantastic. Like I immediately feel like I am back in the beautiful world of Stardew Valley. All the crops, all of the villagers. It's like you end up having such a rich history with all of them, and so many more details if you've played the video game as well. So I felt like so many of those components are beautifully capturing what kind of Stardew Valley is about. But what I did not love was the fact that with the video game, one of the things that I love about it is that you play that over multiple years and you can sort of take it at your own pace and do the things that feel right or focus on whatever you want to focus. And so for me, it's a very relaxing, almost meditative game. Whereas the board game experience, because it's obviously trying to make it fit into a, 1 hour, I believe it's like a 1 hour experience, or 45 minutes or 40-ish minutes per player, they have to obviously put some constraints around a lot of the things that you can do. And so by having those objectives as the thing that you have to meet by the end of the year or by the end of the game, it sort of takes away that beautiful relaxed feeling of just exploring and kind of working on different things to see what happens. And it makes it more of a, nail biting, are we going to make it? Or to the point where sometimes, and this has been some of the critiques that it's received, there are elements where there's a lot of luck involved. For example, if you go fishing or if you go to the mines, you are relying on the luck of the dice roll to make sure that you actually are able to either get the fish that you need or get something worthwhile in the mines. And often you can end up getting nothing and feeling like, because there's so few actions in any given turn, that it was just sort of a big waste. So as a fan of the game, overall, I would say they have done a beautiful job at capturing so many of the beautiful elements of the game. The overall spirit of, it's about that friendship and those connections and that connection to nature. I think that does come through. The chill exploration element is probably what it struggles with the most, and the frustration of the luck of the draw, because if you haven't been able to mitigate as much for it, you don't actually have that much time or that many actions, particularly when it comes to some of those bundles or some of those grandpa goals. One of the things that I love doing is, if I'm playing this game, I love playing the soundtrack of Stardew Valley just in the background to have as a, that immersive kind of experience. I love that it's a callback to all those things and all those, beautiful memories that I have with the video game. The actions are actually quite satisfying, I have found, even though it does feel like you don't get that many things that you can do in any given turn. You still, there's still, like, every time that you get an event is sort of, it's sort of exciting because it's kind of like that element of revealing a bit more story. Every time you get an item, which can happen as you sort of do a couple of different things, like some of the cards will give them to you, or when you complete one of the bundles at the community center. They can be really cool because, again, items are usually things that you will equip and then will give you an addition, like an advantage or of some description for the rest of the game. So who's this game suited for? I would say definitely if you love the video game and you love board games, then you absolutely have to try this. If you love co-op games, I would be interested to hear, because we don't play a lot of co-ops. I tend to just play them solo. It felt like I managed to convince Amy to play a couple of times, and it felt great. Like, I actually did find things like the events were really engaging. Every time you get an item is quite exciting. It's that sort of sense of like, ooh, what's it going to be? And, how am I going to be able to get around or have an advantage? The farming elements also felt fairly satisfying. Things like the crows coming in and, making your life miserable because they're stealing exactly the stuff that you're needing to sell down the track. Like, I really enjoyed that. So I would say the only thing is it's probably a little bit more on the complex side for someone who's brand new to gaming. So they would be well suited to have a board game guide, or someone who's comfortable with kind of with Euro-ish board gaming and worker placement. If you're a heavy gamer, then possibly, or a Euro gamer, then possibly the luck element might be a bit off-putting. There are ways of mitigating, but it's not kind of ideal. So is it a game that I would be keeping in my collection? Absolutely. But this is what I wanted to go into next, and it's the reason I would be keeping it. I would be keeping it regardless, but by far the thing that made me really, really love this game is when I tried a very unofficial hack campaign mode that I based on Newsford, which is a beautiful game by Uwe Rosenberg, which I also covered. It's the only other video in this series so far, the ThinkerThemer solo series. And in Newsford, they have this campaign mode where you are working your way through all the different buildings over a series of games. So I figured, well, let me try that with this game. It's a world that I love being a part of. I just can't get enough of it. It's like, it's my happy place. So I'm like, well, what if with the deck, and you might see here that the deck is usually just meant to be 4 cards per season times 4. And so usually after, 4 cards for spring, summer, fall, and winter, the game would end. But what you may see here is I actually have the entire stack of cards that come with the game, which has been one of the other critiques of the game, that there's a lot of cards and there's a lot of different things that you may not, it's great for replayability because it means that you'll always be seeing sort of new things, but it can be very daunting for someone just kind of coming into the game. It's actually not only not daunting, but perfect for a really epic campaign game. So what I decided to do is I made up the deck as if it is 5 years. So that means that, so it's the same setup that you do. So 4 season cards for each season, and you just repeat that sort of year after year, 5 times through the deck. And so the idea is, I call it the Completionist campaign, because the idea is not just to get 4 goals and get the bundles, it's to get all of the goals throughout over the course of 5 games, and all of the bundle cards, and there's, I believe, for each room there's 5 cards. So and build all of the buildings and have friended every villager at least once throughout your 5 games and have completed the museum. And obviously had every single animal or cared for absolutely every single animal that is available to be had. So the way I play this is, first I set up the game as if it's going to be actually 5 games. Any one given game is still going to play exactly the same way. However, there is no loss or losing condition at the end if I don't meet some of the goals or some of the bundles are still incomplete, because the idea is that I can space out my time of how I'm going to go about that over a series of games. What this means is that you now have the freedom to just relax into the game and decide, well, maybe first I'll start out by making a lot of money, focusing on my crops, focusing on just going very farm heavy if I've got some farm objectives. And then as you're completing throughout the game, as you're completing objectives, obviously they would be removed from the game and immediately new objectives would be revealed, until we complete all 8 grandpa objectives. And same with the different rooms. So with the rooms, the way that I've played it is that only the first card or the first bundle in the stack for that room needs to be revealed with hearts, and then from that point on is just looking at paying the cost of the subsequent bundles for that room. One of the key things for this to work over a series of games is going to be the cleanup at the end of one game and at the start of another, which is sort of representing what happens, all the accounting that we would do at the end of the year. The only other mid-game variation that I use for this is that the Joja tiles are also going to have a campaign or legacy component. So try and keep them aside as you're removing them from the board. If this stack, I should say, gets depleted, then reshuffle them and create the stack again. So the cleanup that you would have to do for campaign purposes in between your games, so at the end of year 1, for example, would include things like, with your buildings, any buildings that you have built, you are going to be allowed to keep only if you're able to pay at least half or just half their coin value, which is to represent the maintenance that you'd have had to pay, either for the year or the maintenance in terms of upkeep, or be it your mortgage rates or whatever it is. So buildings that you've built can stay if you have enough money by end of game that you can pay half its coin cost. You don't have to worry about the resources if they needed resources as well. When it comes to animals, if you acquired any animals, they can stay as long as the building that is needed for them to be around, so be it the barn or the coop, if you manage to keep that building, as in make sure that you pay half the coin value for its maintenance cost, then you're able to keep those animals. The only thing that will happen with those animals, though, is that they will change from their happy side back to their neutral side. This is kind of like the equivalent of over winter, maybe we didn't have that heater that they so love. When it comes to the villagers, if you've made any friends this year, you're going to be able to keep the friends that you're either able to give a gift that they like by the end of the year. So remember, the year's going to be ending during the holiday season. So, a good way of keeping your friends engaged and connected and in a, kind of loving state with you is to give them something that they like. Be thoughtful. The other way is to just simply make sure that you kind of pay off or have a heart that you can donate for each one of those friends that you want to keep. If you're able to pay that cost by the end of the year, you're allowed to keep those friends and have them at the start of your next year. When it comes to your tools, you're going to be able to keep the tool. However, the modification that I did for this was the tool has to be downgraded by 1 level. This is to signify both wear and tear of that tool, but also the fact that maybe over the holiday season we weren't as active in our skill, so we may have disskilled a little bit and we're a little bit rusty at the start of the next season. So it's just a little bit of a small step back. But when it comes to things like any profession upgrades or items, those can stay. In terms of the museum, any donations that you've made can stay without any changes. Whatever level you've reached in the mine can stay there. any remaining cash that you have after you've paid off all the different things, like for example, the buildings that you wanted to keep in place, any remaining cash is donated because it's sort of been spent over the holiday season on presents for people, also on bills, and then on charity because it's the time of giving. So we're broke by the end of it. But we again start the new year with 3 coins like we do in any regular game. If you had any Joja tiles on the board, they would stay because obviously Joja's doesn't take any holidays, and their hold on whatever they've got, whatever action spot they had, is going to stay there. And then at the end of that year, we're just going to be obviously moving on to the next year, just fish out the end of season cards and then place them in the right spots for the new year. And then you're ready to go. And that is my campaign mode, or the Completionist epic campaign that I love to play with this game in order to just feel like I can explore the world and take my time and work on whatever I want to work on without this pressure of, I only have these 4 seasons to get everything done. It's like, well, no, I actually have, if you've played the video game, you get very little done in the first year, or at least I do. And one of the things that I love the most is kind of getting lost in one thing one year and then maybe focusing on another in the next. So this sort of very unofficial hack allows me to do that, and it just has meant hours and hours of fun playing, often till late hours in the night. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and also hit the notification bell in case you want to be notified whenever we release any new videos. We have obviously every week or every second week we have the small talk series and the back chat series. Back chat is where we look at Kickstarter and crowdfunded games, and we kind of talk about our top 10 most anticipated crowdfunded games for the last 2 weeks, or the campaigns that are active. And then small talk is the much more relaxed, when we just kind of chat about frequently asked questions and usually look at 5 different smaller box games. We also do a lot of video reviews, so if you've got any questions, or if you decide to try out the campaign mode, let me know in the comments how you went. Let me know if you've got any other thoughts or ideas. We're kind of trying to work on, or I'm kind of trying to work on, a competitive variant, again, very unofficial, just to kind of rope in Amy to play the game with me a bit more. But yeah, happy farming, and I will see you later.